were some commitments made, especially in terms of greenhouse gas emissions. Obviously, there was some acknowledgement on loss and damage, but this was still a significant discussion that a lot of developed nations weren't so keen about in participating in because they believe or they don't want to be accountable for the disastrous countries like the Philippines are experiencing. Loss and damage, kasi the concept there is that the polluting countries, so the developed nations, so really have significantly caused the rise of greenhouse gas emissions and have warmed the climate and have led to these extreme weather events. Quite underwhelming because there were a lot of closed door events and a lot of saying that they couldn't maximize capacity because of the pandemic, even if we were testing every day. But overall, it was a really unique and memorable experience altogether.
Yes, thank you, thank you. I'm really envious, not for just the sake of traveling, but for the because I wanted to be maybe I think my calling is to be a climate activist too, and I wish I was there to speak out on about our climate. And finally, the more important question with what you're working on, what is water security and how big of a concern is this in the Philippines or and also around the world?
Siguro I'll expand the question a bit and really go along the lines of WASH. So what you mentioned a while ago, where the scope or the sector that we work in, so that's water, sanitation, and hygiene, because that's really what Sustainable Development Goal 6 or SDG 6 wants to further. So there was mention about the 17 goals and how the Philippines is, a participant and committed to achieving these by 2030. So SDG 6 really means that we want to ensure the availability of clean water and sanitation, but also the sustainable management of it. So they go hand in hand because they are human rights. So water and sanitation really come as a pair, and they're basic building blocks to preventing disease and ultimately achieving health. Because if you have your health, then people can be more can actively participate in society, better. Kids can go to school more or stay in school more. Adults can work because they're not getting sick or being inundated by bills from hospital just because they're drinking contaminated water and getting sick from it. So it's really important in that sense. Access to clean water is not just about quenching thirst or providing people with something to drink, but really providing something vital and essential. And that's water that's used, at an individual or in terms of our health, but also talking about water in industry, in the use of industry, and how, there are water footprints to consider, not just your carbon footprint. And really, just in the whole context of this, unfortunately, from the 2021 SDG 6 report, we're definitely not on track to achieve universal access to water and sanitation by 2030 because 26% of the world's population still lacks safely managed drinking water services. So what this means is that the water isn't just available, but it's also readily accessible so people don't have to walk long distances, and it's also free from contamination. So to that degree, water being located on site, available when needed, and free from contamination, there's still 2 billion people who lack access to that, and 3.6 billion to safely manage sanitation. So what this means is that the excrement or defecation, poo and pee, is treated on site or off site in a safe manner, and it's not they're not having to share facilities. So in the Philippines, naman, it's still half of the population who don't have access to safely managed drinking water. So you can really see how that hampers development at individual, family, and community level.
Yes. Yeah, that's something I only just realized recently while I was preparing for this event. Um, and we'll share the link further because UNICEF published a report on water security. We'll post the link in the Makati House Twitter account so people can find more information about water security. And finally, we'll return to Charles, um, who who's with Field Ready. Um, Charles, what or who inspired you to become a maker? And also, what is a maker for our guests?
All right, thanks, JP. So basically, a maker is somebody that likes to tinker and create things out of a hobby or just any time that the person likes to do that. And I think just to answer this very personal question, I like to think that I grew up as a crafty, creative student. Was up when I was in school. I took industrial design in college, and I really loved that. And when I had my first job, I was hired by the Department of Trade and Industry here to do the programs and product development using the Fab Lab in Bohol. Fab Lab is short for Fabrication Laboratory, and it's a space where you could create almost anything using these facilities. These are public facilities that you can use. And this was the first Fab Lab in the Philippines. Now there's almost 40 Fab Labs all over the country. And every aspect of the concept of open space, open learning, and open design was something that I personally appreciate. And just knowing how anyone can access solution was a big part of why I still in the same maker landscape that I am right now, especially with my work with Field Ready.
Yes. Thank you for sharing that. How about the um, for Field Ready? What are humanitarian issues that your group is working on, and what kind of technologies are involved?
Thanks, JP. To begin with, I'd like to introduce what Field Ready is. Basically, Field Ready is a nonprofit NGO that helps others in conflict and disaster situation. What that means is we bring manufacturing to development and humanitarian spaces. Our mission is to transform global aid by localizing manufacturing, using technology and innovation to engage people in new ways. Basically, we create and make critical items on the ground where and when they're needed, and this is how we contribute to make the world a better place. Hence our tagline, humanitarian supplies made in the field. And one of the things that we wanted to tackle as an issue in the humanitarian landscape is that what we're targeting is a supply chain of 8 items. Generally, these are ordered overseas. It would take a huge percentage of an organization's budget to pay for shipments, freights, regional storages, and customs, especially customs here. Also, a study shows that an average of 60% of like an organization or NGO's budget goes to logistic costs, bringing these items that are needed for the communities from overseas, just because there's not much availability of these items locally. And because it's ordered overseas, it'll also take time for these to be delivered to the affected population. So Field Ready as an organization, we wanted to find ways for these 8 items to be made locally, and that is our main goal. To make it where and when they're needed, as what I mentioned. This supports local capacity and also supports the local business to manufacture humanitarian grade items that we've developed that caters to the need of a specific community. And this is why I love the quote that you mentioned about Makati House saying Filipino helping Filipinos. And from that, we develop a plethora of products that includes wash as the same as Wage for Water with Jenica, and to health and to medical devices. Just to mention a few, we have locally made latrines in Fiji because we operate globally tackling open defecation. We make medical devices and do repairs in Syria. Also, at the same time, had this project with Waste for Warmth called Waste for Warmth, where we recycle plastic to insulate them into Syrian camps for winter. Also doing some hand washing needs in East Africa. And of course, here in the Philippines, recently for the Typhoon Odette response, the sustainable power alternative here, and many more in other countries, as I mentioned.
Yes, thanks for thanks for letting us know what Field Ready is doing, and thanks for and I appreciate what Field Ready is doing, especially in. I've seen you've had other projects in other places like Fiji, which is interesting, because that's a I think that's a parallel issue where we also have a lot of small islands who might have limited resources or doesn't have uh, water security infrastructure ready right now. Yeah, so thanks, Charles. And then for I want to circle back around all the speakers, and get your opinion. Firstly, what was your reaction to Typhoon Odette? And secondly, do you think we can be prepared for the next super typhoon? Why don't we start with Miss Choi?
Yeah. Um, I've actually noticed uh, last year there was a typhoon during the pandemic. It's Rolly, and I've seen so much flooding, and I felt that it was almost like the one that we had for Ondoy, and I just felt so. Uh, I was I was I was so affected by this because I saw that the water was brown and I knew that it was soil. So I was thinking, what are we doing from one storm, one typhoon to the next? We are not doing anything to prepare for the next, and we have been called the 7-Eleven of disasters, and we're just talking about typhoons, but we also have volcanic eruptions and earthquakes and fires, and we're just so um, we go through a lot of disasters, and it seems like we never learn. And so since that time, about 2 years ago, I've started to really work with people for building resilience in society. And when Odette happened, I was just so afraid that we're not prepared again. And this is the reason why this year I talked with Joe, the emergency architects, and talked to our managing committee, the top brass of the United Architects of the Philippines. And that's when we decided to institutionalize emergency architecture so that more architects can help. An ultimate goal of the United Architects of the Philippines, emergency architects, would be to mitigate the impact of these disasters. Currently, we have great appreciation for the work that Jenica and Charles talked about, because we have come across WASH and Project Bangon Bohol in our work just between December to the present. And we saw that if we will just work together, we can help immediately, no, through food and non-food assistance. But then eventually, as architects, we know that there's much that we can do to mitigate the impact of every disaster that would hit us. And so, more than feel downtrodden by Odette, I really felt pumped up to help our people and to help architects help other Filipinos and even non-Filipinos, but humanity in this sense. So that's I was inspired. So there.
How about you, Sergio?
Yes, what is frightening to me when the typhoon was nearing is its low altitude, mababa siya, no? And aside from the velocity, 200 something kilometers per hour, baka maraming hindi handa doon sa dadaanan, maraming vulnerable areas, communities.
Yeah.
You know, ang pansin ko paghabagat, pagka southwest monsoon season, medyo naitutulak yung bagyo galing sa Pacific Ocean pataas, ano, papalapit pa lang siya ng Pilipinas sa area of responsibility. May tumutulak ng southwesterly monsoon. Kaya pupunta siya doon sa itaas, well, tatamaan niya yung Batanes. Pero pag amihan, dire-diretso, it really cuts across the Philippine archipelago. Ang talagang natatakot ako noon, ang baba niya. But you know, during the past several years, bumababa, hindi naman talagang noon kaya sabi ko kanina 44 years na ako arkitekto. Hindi siya masyado sa noon sa Mindanao. But lately, Pablo, yan yung mga bagyo, tinamaan yung lower part ng dati, ng gitna ng Mindanao. And so this one, I thought maraming madadaanan na hindi handa. So, yeah. Do I think we can be prepared? I really don't know the answer. But we hope that we all get our acts together. Gobyerno, alam ng gobyerno, maraming nakakaalam ng may mga solution. I hope they could get us together to really work. We've been trying to work with them lately. Nagiging audience namin sila, pinapakinggan naman kami. We really hope that this would it could be sustained at magkaroon talaga ng projects na tunay na nanggagaling din dun sa mga yung mga may alam, alam naman natin na meron talaga silang budget. Architects are really able to work with yung mga budget, costings, consideration.
Yeah.
We really hope that we could be able to work with them, makapag-model, ito ba yung pwedeng kaya ng mga 200 kph na sistema ng basic shelter. Yun. We hope to be able to work with them so that we could get somewhere and start a culture of yung kaya nating pababain yung casualty. Hindi yung pare-pareho na lang every time na merong super typhoon.
Yeah. Can I say something also about your question also, if we're prepared for the next super typhoon? Because we have been called to make changes on the architectural code. Yung binanggit ni Joe that the velocity of the typhoon Odette was 180, pero ang ating National Building Code, it's ready for only 125 kilometers per hour. So we really need to make changes, and it's the professionals who can actually do something about this. Kasi in one of the researches also of the emergency architects, yung Haiyan, it was like 250 kilometers per hour. So talagang mas mabilis siya. Pero 6 lang ang landfalls niya. Etong Odette, 180 kilometers per hour. But we heard from our researcher friend, si Jomelis, she told us that 9 landfalls. And so mababa siya talaga. So talagang maraming masasaktan, maraming masasakuna talaga nung bagyo. So this is what we're aiming for. We don't know. Ngayon nakaabang kami, uy, dumidilim na naman. Ninenervyos talaga kami sa baka dumating na bagyo. But we're doing our best and we hope na ma-mitigate at saka masanay mga tao. Yeah, so there.
does, or where it really specializes in, especially because it's how it was, formed in disaster response, to respond to disasters initially. We thought it was just, another typhoon. It was a super typhoon, but I guess as Filipinos, or maybe, I'm speaking for myself, for a country who averages 20 typhoons, we're kind of used to it. So in a way, I don't think there was enough warning or enough, in some ways, enough scaremongering for people to take this typhoon seriously and the gravity and maybe, but I would say what was discussed a while ago, that it was unprecedented in terms of landfall. Talagang nag-island hopping yung bagyo. So in terms just being so used to typhoons and then not being able to take it seriously, I guess for me individually and as an organization, we were quite overwhelmed. It was quite a shock to us still, and for us at Waves for Water, it's one of the biggest, or it's the biggest typhoon that we locally mobilized a response for, save for Haiyan, which our global office was then involved, and how Waves for Water started operating it. So I think that was a very overwhelming experience for us. And I think what needs to be mentioned and isn't talked about as much is also that we are in a pandemic. Like systems and processes in place then couldn't really be easily applied because there was so many more restrictions and also precautions that needed to be taken to respond to such a scale. So in terms of the preparation, I think we should continue pursuing, preparation, and not just preparation, but the other factors, like the whole cycle of it, from mitigation, slowing the rate of global warming, like really trying to see this in a grander scale, and then building resilience, building adaptation. So from that, preparing and mitigating, and then, when you respond to a disaster, after that would be the recovery phase, and then building, mitigating, building resilience again. So I think it needs to be taken, that approach needs to be looked at holistically by, different sectors responding and addressing different sectors of a disaster. So there's wash, there's shelter, there's food, there's livelihood. So it's really the framework that I think it needs to be addressed in. And what's been mentioned is people just really need to be working together and talking to each other. So I think that's the only way we can be prepared for the next super typhoon.
Thank you, Jenica. How about you, Charles?
Yes, thanks, JP. And I do agree with the co-speakers' thoughts about all of this. I think I'll start with what my boss has told me in this job. He said that it's not a disaster if we are not vulnerable to it, and I agree with that. But to answer the question, I think it's very hard for me myself to speak of the general public on how, if they are prepared for the next one. I think, and I agree with the rest of the speakers saying about all the mitigation that everybody has to do in order for them to be prepared on this. But I think my heart goes directly to a lot of the island communities, and that's why we have targeted a lot of our work there, is that because not everybody has the same amount of resource around, let alone the initial geographical situation, especially with these island communities. And what happens is that every typhoon, their life is always going to be like, after a typhoon, they rebuild, start again, and then another typhoon comes, and then they rebuild, start again. And there was a lot of conversation that we had with some cluster meetings with the provincial government of Bohol, when we've identified a lot of the islands in Bohol being highly affected. And some of these islands aren't really supposed to be habited by anybody, but because some of them has already established their life there, and in their livelihood they're fishing, it's hard for the government also to pull them back into the mainland. Because if you have to pull them back into the mainland, there's also this holistic approach of providing them the enough livelihood at the same time when they're going to be in the mainland. So there's a lot of give and take. There's a lot of trying to figure out the gray area for this to work out together. If we're speaking for the island communities, because with them it's tougher given again the limited resources and their geographical situation. And with that, I would say it's hard to say that we're all prepared for the next one.
Right. Especially with the pace of the change of legislation and also policy making. I think uh, for human civilization, that's moving so slow at the rate that the climate is changing. Like the earlier example, the Philippine Architectural Code has has specifications, has designs for 120 kilometers an hour uh, winds when right now that's already changed. If we change it now, how strong will be the typhoons 10 years from now? And not only that, we'll have a higher sea level. So there are other factors to consider in the future. So I think that's the challenge of the leaders of not only just of the Philippines but the world as well. What will be our climate challenges in the next 10 or 20 years? So that's more or less uh, 3 to 4 presidential terms in the Philippines. So yeah, thank you, everyone for sharing your thoughts on that. We will return in 2 minutes. We'll just take a quick break, and we'll return to emergency architects and Waves for Water Philippines and Field Ready to discuss what they did during or what they are still doing right now or what they did to respond to Odette and what they are working on how we can address this our new climate reality. Stay tuned. Thank you for continue to listening in.
Joe?
Welcome to the Twitter
Yep.
space of Makati
Hi,
House.
Choi.
Our mission is to help Filipinos help other Filipinos.
Ang pwede ko lang sabihin dito is
On
really
December
the
16th in
WD.
2021,
I'm sorry,
Typhoon Rai,
Choi.
locally named
I'll
Odette in
call
the
you.
Philippines,
Okay.
made its first landfall. Categorized as a super typhoon, the climate disaster is the deadliest in 2021, taking hundreds of lives, destroying property costing an estimated $794 billion. Filipinos banded together to recover and rebuild homes and the lives of those affected. But what can we do to adapt to our new climate reality?
You have a copy
We've
of all the
invited emergency
questions?
architects, Waves for Water Philippines, and Field Ready to share their
all of
projects
those
and initiatives.
questions are the work of your
A reminder,
research,
our
especially
space
sa
is recorded
coconut,
and being streamed live to
I think
YouTube,
most of you
Facebook, and
would
Clubhouse.
be that baka
Once again,
ang suggestion ko
welcome
take
to
off
Makati
mo
House.
si one of the directions which is yung shelter for ganyan, yung ganon. And then i-diretso mo siya. Tapos
All right, we're
pwede naman
back.
siguro na ikaw na yan,
And
dire-diretso. All
so
four questions are about
let's
you. You may want to
discuss
check with JP if you will ask pa all those
the work
questions
of
isa-isa.
emergency
Or pwede niyang
architects.
parang isang
Let me
hili.
catch
Tapos ikaw
in.
na,
Sorry.
you
All
may
right.
want to ask it 1 minute na lang yan. I
Yeah.
can
So
ano sa
emergency
huli
architects
interject yung meeting natin with the
with
DSWD
Sergio
and
and
how
Miss Choi.
the government has a
Um,
program but they've gotten in touch
uh,
with us so that we
and
can share
they
with them
have their
whatever
resilient
diba, that we have
shelter
discovered.
core.
Pero all of the questions are all
And
you.
one of the
Ha?
other
Sige, you may
guests
wanna check with
that we
JP.
invited
Pero
to
alam mo,
this
para siyang
event
ano
was Local
Parang
Lab
siyang utang, no?
that's been working in
Ha?
Siargao. They have
Okay, bye.
they've been collecting the felled trees, the felled coconut trees in Siargao, an island in southern Philippines, who was probably the first place that hit landfall and took the brunt of the damage as Typhoon that was strongest. So they have a large volume of coconut tree inventory that they can use for materials in building new homes. And I'd like to get the insights of emergency architects on what their plans are and maybe we can help them, and also we'll find out what the from what I understand, this is um, a collaboration with the government as well, or an open consultation with the government. So are you ready, Sir Joe and Miss Joy?
Yes.
Yes.
All
Yes,
right.
we are.
Okay. First off is you mentioned resilient shelter core. I've shortened it to RSC for now.
Yes.
So what is resilient shelter core?
Okay, the Resilient Shelter Corps. It was meant to be a response, a proposal to the government through the DSWD at first, and then later on to the Department of Human Settlements and Urban Development. You know, we gather that there is this uh, proposed proposed budget, no? It's like they're trying to earmark for every family whose house had been totally devastated. There are about 400,000 of these families. An aid of about something like 30,000. So after that meeting, we worked on the 30,000. What can we do with 30,000? Number one, it should not be anything temporary. It has to be something that's permanent. It has to be something that has some degree of resiliency already. And it has to have a roof so that it can provide a as a temporary shelter, no? So the family has roof already over their heads. So we realized there were a lot of felled coconut trees. So that would be the main feature of the solution. Andiyan na nagkalat na yung debris. Ipa-farm mo na lang siya, no? Ipa-process mo ng tama so that you pick only, you select only what is the resilient portion or the part of the material that can be utilized, no? As a good component in building. It is possible. There are about siguro 30%, 20% ng failed trees. Even 10% siguro kung bata pa yung puno. That can be utilized. So, we took off. Gumawa kami ng design, 6 na poste na mayroong 6 na pundasyon, may roof framing, isang shed na ganyan, and then may yero. Damihan natin ng fasteners para matibay. And there's a way of doing it. We formulated something that's already very well known in construction. It's the shelter anchor tree, the main component of this resilient shelter core, no? Wherein there is a connection, merong a network of connection within the structural network, no? That has to retain a structural integrity for the desired period, kung gaano katagal mo gustong tumagal yung shelter mo. So it's just a matter of making use of materials that are available. Wala namang special. It's just bearing in mind logically the way that you should connect all the components para hindi siya lilipad. So bearing in mind na malakas yung hangin with whatever materials available, no? So ganito siya, no? We're talking about the vulnerable communities, what they can afford, ano yung kaya nilang i-put up, ano yung kaya nilang bilhin. So may coco lumber dyan, may yero, sige, may tornilyo siguro, may semento, may graba, may pako, merong alambre, merong kabilya. Those are the very materials that we're employing in this. It became a model for us. We proposed it. We found out na yung 30,000 pesos nila, kung meron silang 30,000 pesos na i-allocate, ay kasyang ibili ng materials para dun sa 6 na poste at 18 square meters na footprint ng isang temporary shelter. But mind you, this temporary shelter with already the roof will become later on the part, a basic part of the house. Kasi later on, susunod na phase mo niya, siguro lalagyan mo na siya ng sahig, whether it's made of wood or made of concrete, magfi-fill ka doon siguro ng earth, no? Lalagyan mo ng hollow blocks, or pwede rin kahoy Then, dahan-dahan, portion by portion. Progressively, you put up the walls, and then you put up the toilet until you complete the house. Yung 18 square meters na yon, later on, pag natapos mo na, you try to replicate it on the other side, i-mirror mo yung structure na yon, 18 square meters siya, magiging 36 square meters. Yung 36 square meters mo, compliant ka na dun sa tinatawag na pwede ka na you're qualified dun sa loan sa socialized housing, finance corporation. Kasi meron silang bracket na 36 square meters. So it's just a matter of constructing the house portion by portion so that you're able to match your budget, and doing it in a way na meron siyang degree of resiliency. Matibay siya. I have I can't see it, but I'm sure you're displaying some slides,
Yes.
JB.
Yeah. So Cass is posting the link. He's uploading the plates. So in the meantime, while Cass is doing that, can you tell us more? What is your involvement with local lab or the Philippine Coconut Authority? You also mentioned the SWD or the NHA.
Yes, local lab. It's an interesting group. It's a cooperative right in Siargao, and they have this project. They call it the Coco Lab. Talagang sila, enthusiast sila. Nasa advocacy talaga nila to help, the coconut farmers, and to, whatever the benefits, at saka kung anong kayang gawin nung, yung wonder, di ba miracle, miracle material, plant, yung coconut. Throughout its span of life, 65 years, it gives up oil and a lot of byproducts. Until finally, pagka hindi mo na siya magamit, dahil pwede mo na siyang putulin, meron pa ring final na income yung doon, yung farmer. And local lab is advocating really. Actually, they're spearheaded the processing of cocoa timber in Siargao. I introduced them to PCA na national, kasi meron naman PCA din, but the national office were able to help them very significantly.
So would that be the Philippine Coconut Authority?
Oh yes, that's the Philippine Coconut Authority. I was introduced to them in 1986 in Zamboanga. We were tutored on how to make use, how to utilize, how to process and how to preserve the coconut tree, processing it into cocoa timber. That's PCA. The SWDNHA, they were part of this technical working group. The first time we attended, we were invited by the SWD, and they, together with other stakeholders, other agencies that have concern in shelter. And right there, we proposed to them this, and on a second meeting, we proposed to them this resilient shelter core, the 30,000. We call it the Project 30K. Because kasya kasi yung 30,000 nila yun daw ang meron sila. O sige, i-match natin yan. Pinresent we had the opportunity of presenting it to the shelter cluster of Caraga. And then they asked us for drawings and designs and estimates so that they could present it to Surigao del Norte, the LGU of the province of Surigao del Norte. I think Surigao del Norte is studying it very well. It was received, with interest. And right now we're pursuing also with Region 7, that's Western Visayas, Central Visayas, Region 7 DS, HUD, and it has been presented there by the UAP chapter in Cebu. The same proposal, no, and the NHA is taking a look at it, and we hope to be able to pursue it also, because ano siya eh, when you talk of budget, ito talaga yung ano, no, yung mababa ang costings niya, no, na incremental din ang atake so that the people can afford it, no, progressively, no, part by part.
To focus on? Hi, Sergio. Cass has already uploaded the plates. Can you tell us which one should we look at while you describe?
Yeah, for the resilient shelter core, that would be the progressive
Anchor tree
drawings.
bay detail.
The one with the 6 posts first.
Mm-hmm. Okay, yes. So we have an animation of the design. Okay, the 6 posts, yes.
Yeah, so yun yung incremental design, ano. First, you have yung first phase would be erecting the post on the pedestals, no, concrete pedestals. So you erect the 6 posts and you erect the roof framing. You construct the supports of the roof cover, then you install the roof cover very well with good fastening, no, with the exact number of fasteners so that mas matibay siya. And then take note, I'd like you to take note, no, doon kasi nagkakaroon madalas ng ano eh, there's a huge difference between a properly fastened roof and with a loosely fastened one, ano. Kasi ang matitipid mo, let us say, sa isang bahay na kasing laki niyang 18 square meters na yan, siguro wala pang 500 pesos. But the 500 pesos extra you spend for fasteners to make sure that very thorough yung pagkakapasin ng roof mo, makes the entire difference eh, para ma-secure mo yung roofing mo. The roofing is the first one to go pag malakas ang hangin, no? Uunahin niya yung mga edges. So pag weak yung edges mo, and we instruct workers to provide extra fasteners along the edges, no? Dapat pagdating sa edges, doble. It's not being practiced really. If you look at yung nag-tear out na mga roofing material, it's always because there are less fasteners eh. So if we could just do that, spend a little more time and more materials, it would make a lot of difference. And so the next, ang susunod doon is you have the walls. You construct the wall as a second phase. So you see, yung budget, yung pagbabudget ng bahay, talagang nakaayon dun sa progress nung ano, no, as I've said, we're talking about the vulnerable communities, no. Yung mga yan na hindi sila, they don't have the budget right away to construct a full house. So dahan-dahan yung pag-erect. But they erect it in such a manner na resilient siya. And yun yung pwede nating ituro sa kanila eh. We can provide them with we can enable them, no? We can capacitate these communities on how to work on their houses incrementally, but you know, with a good amount of resilient practice. And next to that, andyan na yung ano, yung the whole house, maybe the toilet is already there inside. The toilet can be, yung toilet pwede siyang ano fiber cement board eh. You can apply tiles on fiber cement board. You can also paint fiber cement board. It's good as waterproof. Pag gumamit ka ng elastomeric paint or a waterproofing paint, that's good. It could last a long time. But if you want to tile it, you can tile it next month, next year, no? And then merong bagong gustong gawin ng ano, ang the government's entertaining the idea of what they call, it's a new, ito siguro yung pwede mong sabihin innovation, because they would like to integrate what they call as a panic room, a containment or a room that would shelter, that would secure the family in the event of very strong typhoon, no? Like masira na yung bahay pero maiiwan yung tinatawag na, well, they term it as panic room. So we said that for purposes of you know, para hindi naman masyadong mahal abutin, because to construct a totally concrete room para sa mga ibang, you know, families, baka hindi nila ma-afford, no? So we can just maintain that the toilet can be able to hold about 5 or 6 members of the family. So you just make the toilet, let's say a 1 by 2 meter toilet, hollow block, i-hollow block mo siya with a roofing also that's made of a thick fiber cement board. It can be fastened in such a way that it will be very, very tough and rigid. So you can have a incorporated in your house, even though your house is small. In case of a really extreme event, you can shelter inside the panic room for about 12 or 12 hours or 24 hours. Finally, JP, we have there on the final stage is another set of posts, no, on the other side of the house, that is telling that it's indicating that the house is ready for a second phase. Ito yung sinasabi kong it could be expanded to form a total footprint of 2 times 18 square meters. That's 36 square meters, making it compliant with policies, no, for para pwede kang mag-loan para ma-expand mo yung yung bahay. And that's the requirement of SHFC.
Yes, I saw that. That was it looked like a very good innovation, that it can be expanded, or if they have more resources available to them, they can easily implement the expansion. So there's I really like that part, that second phase. And I'm gonna turn the next parts to Nino. Nino, can you what more are we asking from from emergency architects?
Hi, Sir Joe. I'm Nino. I just wanted to ask, since you have expertise and the know-how about coconuts and how to use it for infrastructures. So, we also know that Siargao was one of the places that would be affected by your death. And I just wanted to ask, how many houses can be built with coconut trees in Siargao?
I'm sorry, JP, I didn't quite get it.
Yes. How many
To
houses?
paint?
Yes. How many houses can be built with the felled coconut trees in Siargao? By your estimate?
Yeah. Yes, JP. In Siargao, there are about 1 million. There are about 1 million trees felled. For a full-grown coconut, there are about 180 board feet of timber that you could, process from it. Assuming that there's only 30% that is 60 board feet. The 1 million trees could be able to produce enough timber for 37,500 houses, no? Hindi yung shelter core lang, ano? Complete siya, because there are about 1,600 board feet you need for a complete house eh. For an 18 square meter, yung model namin na 18 square meter, you can be able to build about siguro abot ng let's say 38,000 of those for the if there is a good inventory in the processing of felled trees in Siargao.
But I may have to say, Joe, JP and Nino, that we are continuing with the research and working out documentation for the study on this, because uh, it's something that we have to be very sure, because we have had questions about the strength and the structural integrity of coco lumber, which is most often used as formworks, no, when we build. However, with the study that Joe has had all these years, um, it is really possible that coconut be an alternative, considering that they were felled. But maybe there's a need for treatment, or but it is really highly possible for us to make use of it as a strong and resilient material for construction. So there is enough study, but we just need to, yeah, document it so that we may be able to, yeah, assure the safety of those who will use it as a resilient construction material. No, Joe?
Yes, JP. Yes, Choi. You know, for us architects, we see what we are seeing for many, many years is the potential. And it's just a matter of practice. No, if we use it, we find out what is the strength of this material, whatever it's the weaknesses, and then we try to develop it. It is supported. Meron namang that's the science of it, because we can be able to find out the mechanical properties, hanggang saan ba ang kaya ng coconut lumber. Pwede ba siyang gamitin sa trusses? Definitely pwede siyang gamitin sa stud, sa poste. One thing is yung empirical data na gusto kong palagi sabihin. It's been more than 50 years or 100 years that our communities have been using it. Whenever we go, minsan nag-investigate kami sa mga rural areas, we find coco lumber being used. Gaano katagal nyo na ginagamit? 30 years na ho kami ginagamit nito eh. Of course, merong may inaanay siya, siguro pinalitan na nila kasi inanay na eh. And then there's a way of selecting what is the good part of the coconut. You don't really use the whole log. Kasi pipiliin mo doon kung ano yung matigas. And there's a way of doing it. It's called selection. And then later on, there's a way of preserving it. There's a way of applying economical preservatives, no, like borax solution that you could be able to use the same way as you do with bamboo in order to preserve it for a long time. Ayan, ganyan. And then of course, there's the way of utilizing it. Hindi mo yan gagamitin sa mga areas na palaging nababasa. It has to be covered so that tumagal siya. You know, in 1987, I did this munisipyo in Bantayan Island, Santa Fe, and I didn't go there. I asked for somebody to investigate during Typhoon Haiyan. After 37 years, nung binuklat nila yung mga flooring, nakita nila yung mga floor joists, they are so intact, just like exactly as it has been installed 37 years ago. So kung, if you are able to prevent yung mga pests, mga termites, ganyan, hindi siya nababasa, hindi siya nasisira, it works exactly just like our traditional timber before. Yung mga, apitong, lawaan, tangile, it would work just the same, no? And to top it all, it's really very, very cheap. It's so economical to use.
Right. Nino, I think you have one final question, and I think we'll return to the coconut topic. Okay. I think my app is not working. I think Nino meant to ask who is Resilient Shelter Core for, and how quickly can it be implemented or built?
We propose the resilient shelter core for right now. We're offering it to the Department of Human Settlements and Urban Development. The agency proposes, they study the proposal, and then if it's approved with them, if they think it's workable, they propose it. They're the ones to propose it in LGUs. Alam natin yung LGUs, province, saka city, sila yung mga implementors eh. Sila yung implementors ng program. They budget it sa constituents nila. And then they get also assistance from NHA. The NHA, let's say they undertake a program in the locality, and then they provide for the project. Pagkatapos, mag-a-apply yung mga constituents. Mag-a-apply sila ng loan para they get qualified, and they're being awarded. They get awarded for the housing units. So basically that's how it works. So nandun nakalinya yung proposal namin sa kanila. We're pursuing right now Region 7, and then actually we're actually modeling next month. We're modeling it in Zamboanga City. We were able to partner with a community there, and they're willing, merong gusto magpabahay, gagawa siya ng 2 units. So sabi namin, okay, let's involve your community. Let's show them how to do resilient housing. So i-organize natin doon, may convener tayo doon sa Zamboanga City in order to show the people, no, the shelter stakeholders doon sa lugar na yon, how to be able, using again, no, coco lumber. They have coconut lumber doon eh. Actually, nandun yung PCA, andun yung laboratory ng PCA sa Zamboanga City. So we will be modeling there 2 units of the shelter, the resilient shelter core. How quickly can it be built? Yung resilient shelter core, ano lang yon, mga 1 week or 10 days itayo. Magandang solution siya kasi kailangan mo talagang i-shelter, di ba? Dapat nga within 24 to 48 hours yung nasalanta, may shelter mo na, lalong-lalo na kung may sakit. So this is a good solution. All they have to do once the shelter core is erected, yung sides na lang, maybe they can use plastic or tarpaulin temporarily. And it will go a long way, to sheltering them. So madali lang siya. 10 days, you have it. JP, we can't hear you.
Yes, sorry. Yeah, so unfortunately, Sergio, the Twitter app crashed on my phone, so the audience heard the later part of the question, but we have it on recording, so I'll just transcribe it and post it, and also I'll include it in our podcast. Um, but we'll return to the material, the coconut material, and the resilient shelter core. We'll turn to waves for water. In the meantime, how about I turn it back to Nino to to ask the questions. Hi Nino, thank you.
Yeah, thank you for that, Sergio. I think everyone's excited now for residential shelter for the PL. So, Ms. Janica, I just wanted to ask, what was the waves for water solution in solving access to that space? And siguro we could also dive down to How does wastewater's filtration system?
How does it work? Right. Yeah, thanks for the question. Just as a quick heads up, your audio for me is a bit choppy, but I don't know if that's just me. But to answer your question, what Waste for Water does in disaster context is provide immediate clean water access by using filtration systems. So unlike the bulk supply or transport of water, which is very cost intensive and can lead to a lot of single use plastic waste, because if people are transporting water bottles, the water is only as good as the water inside them lasts. So what we do is really work with existing water sources. So that's your river streams, your posto, your hand pumps, or your balloons, or your wells, and then use a gravity-fed point-of-use filtration device. So this device is your Sawyer system. It's commercially available. The company's positioning really is for outdoor, gear and travel, but we use it in disaster context and apply it at a more communal use. And what that does is use a hollow fiber membrane system or filtration, and similar to dialysis, at such a fine pore size, so at zero point 0.1 micron, bacteria, protozoa, and cysts that cause a host of diseases like typhoid, cholera, salmonella, dysentery, and also E. coli and coliform that lead to a lot of gastrointestinal illnesses like diarrhea are filtered out or are trapped. So what comes out is really clean, clear, and free from contamination water. So this is really useful for Odette because there was a lot of water available. People had recharge for their wells, for their springs, for their hand pumps. The problem really was just it wasn't treated. So while you can boil or you can use initial filtration of sediments when you use shirt or cloth, what the filters do is really point of use treat the water and make sure that there's no bacteria that will cause diseases, because we saw in the gravity of the situation. Kids were literally dying from diarrhea, so easily preventable. So this was just really a huge waste of life. So that's what Waste for Water does, and how the filtration system works is just it's gravity fed, so you don't need electricity. It's really good for off grid. A lot of the problems during Odette was because the damage was so extensive. So you have piping systems that are broken or damaged or contaminated, and your refilling stations. So there's heavy reliance on refilling stations for treated water, and because there's no electricity, generators were lacking. Then people didn't have anywhere to get treated water from. So it was really useful because there was no need for electricity or battery or anything of that sort. So that's what we did, and through a lot of just people rallying for support for Waste for Water, we were able to deploy over 4,000 systems across all 10 provinces affected by the typhoon.
Well, that really sounds promising, Miss Jenny. I think that explains how much Waste for Water really helped a lot of people so far. So also has Waste for Water really always respond to typhoon relief? So when you closed your request, how many families, communities, and etc. did you serve?
So Waves for Water, as I mentioned a while ago, operations began in the Philippines when our global office responded to Haiyan. So it was a typhoon, it was a disaster. So we've always done disaster response. It's really where I would say we shine the most, because we employ guerrilla humanitarianism. So what this means is we work with communities and our volunteers and clean water couriers on the ground, bypassing often government bureaucracy and really being nimble with the logistics channels that we choose. So we had a lot of private sector support, and that really helped pave the way for the filters to really get to Siargao in a matter of days, like the next day actually, when Odette made landfall. So in terms of our impact, as I mentioned, we have deployed over 4,000 systems. So that was our count for our 2-month response. It's 207 communities across 10 provinces. So that's from Bohol, Cebu, Dinagat, up to Siargao, Southern Leyte, Surigao, Negros Occidental, Oriental, Palawan, Siquijor. And we've also funded water pump generators and built rainwater catchment tanks to support and storage capacity. So in terms of the form really was reactive. It wasn't something we've done before. most of the filters we deploy really are from needs assessments conducted. So rapid needs assessments conducted by on the ground. So really, Waves for Water works in a decentralized manner. We've done projects in 56 provinces, so we have a great network of clean water couriers, and it's them we get the information from, send the filters to. And really, it's locals who are best equipped and have wisdom as to how these systems can be maximized. So our goal really as an organization is not to be needed every time something happens. We want to be dispensable and just capacitate and transfer technology to communities. So the form was really just a response to the inundation of requests this week that we had. We received over 400 individual submissions to the form that we had to filter out based on, our availability of systems, resources available, logistics channels that we could force the systems to, and also how much, we've deployed in certain areas already. So there was a tight balancing act, and I think it was really tough, I would say, for me individually, because I was fielding the requests and really just calling the shot. And in the process, it is really tough because you see there was such a huge need, but we were working with limited, systems on hand at the beginning, and it was just tough to say no to people who, I read, I saw that really needed the systems. But the filters and the forms really was just a response to just the magnitude of the request that we got, primarily driven also by social media. So there's huge support rallied by people in our social media community.
Right. I am really always amazed by the great purpose. I really continue to have more interest in it. So maybe we could circle back to that. So, siguro, in your observation, how was the deaths after the impact different from the past years?
But that was really different because, as we discussed a while ago, it was a really strong typhoon. It was a super typhoon category, and it island hopped. Landfall was 8 times, and so the damage was really extensive, and it really crippled city center. So the ones usually who would immediately come to the rescue of smaller islands or more remote areas like Cebu City or Tagbilaran were also severely crippled because they didn't have electricity, they didn't have phones, they didn't have water infrastructure. So, we were also servicing in a way high density areas, which wasn't usually the case. In a lot of disaster response or typhoon response that Waves for Water does, we serve remote off-grid communities because city centers or urban areas we'd like to think, fairly more equipped. They have bigger, VRRM capacity, but really with a debt in the Visayas and Mindanao almost, the whole Visayas region was really just crippled. And so a lot of things had to come from so there's just a lot of things that was expected of us. And I think, a lot of response agencies in general, but just couldn't be done because, for us, our path significantly was tough and not even a huge team because of Omicron, and then we had to pivot. So the pivot for us was to be a fulfillment center. We were just packing filters constantly and deploying them to a lot of communities. So we had to adjust to the situation, and that was the pivot that Waves for Water reverted to.
Right. But check. And I also agree. I'm from Sup, and I was also able to experience that firsthand. I really did. And let me hand it to KJP again for the questions.
Yes, thank you, Nino, for covering that part. I really appreciate that. So for Charles, Charles, I think Charles hails from Bohol, and I think he can relate to. I think he was probably in the Visayas region when Odette hit. Charles, uh, I'm okay to. How many organizations and countries is Field Ready affiliated with?
Thanks, JP. So Field Ready is an organization operates with many organizations worldwide. Just to name a few, the Bureau of Humanitarian Affairs, BHA of USA, Australian Humanitarian Partnership, GISA, Vision, some with Grand Challenges Canada, UNICEF, and many more to mention, really. But within the countries, so we operate in Nepal, in Iraq, in Syria, in the South Pacific, where we're based in Fiji, but also working with the other islands such as Solomon Islands, Vanuatu, and the neighboring island countries. We're also registered in the UK and Australia. We have a COVID response program in the East African countries and Bangladesh. And of course, we are operating also here in the Philippines, recently incorporated last year.
Thanks, Charles. So, how did you find Field Ready, or did they find you?
Right. So, before there these sort of finding each other sort of story, I think even before me and Field Ready have met, or my boss have met, the Philippines was always the target country to do some work Field Ready. As we know, we are ranked as third in the 2018 World Risk Index and as one of the most disaster countries in the world. The organization reached here because of how active the Philippines is even up now, right now, in the global Fab Lab community. Again, the whole Fab Lab fabrication lab community, it's also global at the same time. And back then, I was involved with a lot of the Fab Labs in the Philippines. As I mentioned a while ago, I was hired by DTI to work on the programs for some Fab Labs here in Visayas, both in Bohol and Cebu. And as I got involved into it, I met one of our senior colleagues, Andrew Lam, in a conference in Shenzhen, China. This is an international conference for the whole Fab Lab community back in 2014. And I just had worked up called humanitarian making. Out of this amount of options that you could get in this big conference, or even like tours to go around Shenzhen. There's a lot of like different things that you can learn and access to different technology. But this was something that I really liked, and I was just participating in this workshop that they did. And eventually, 2 years, not much conversation there. 2 years after, they thought uh, of doing the program in the Philippines. 2016, the conference was in France, and a lot of conversations happened, and eventually we started the country program here as, but also just because there's a difference with the model that we're going to be building here from the other country programs is because of the reason of the amount of Fab Labs that we have here. Again, one of our goals is the localization of supply of 8 items. And to mention the Fab Labs and how they're involved is that since the Fab Labs are established all over the countries, even up until north of Ilocos down to the Zamboanga Peninsula, this can be an access to what we call a small scale mass manufacturing. Say an example would be where we've developed a certain product in a specific Fab Lab, but because another Fab Lab has the same set of machines, and maybe a community in that Fab Lab could use some of the things that we've developed in this lab, or maybe they could reinvent or put a layer of innovation into that to be catered to their community, then we could just send data all throughout different Fab Labs just for them to use that and produce some small amount of units for it to be deployed to the communities, and that's sort of where we wanted to also pursue that model together with the Fab Lab network here.
Oh, thank you. I think we need to do another feature on Fab Lab. And
Sure.
yeah, and you were referred to us actually by Jovi. Can you tell us your project at Bohol and your collaboration with Light of Hope uh, and yeah, and your comment on Shenzhen. I did work there for a year, and it's a fantastic place for makers, and that's why I wanted to know more on your on your maker side. So can you tell us more what your main project is right now, um, well, and your collaboration with other or local organizations?
So in the Philippines, after typhoon, the response we did was to develop to locally develop and produce a portable solar charging kit. And where Light of Hope was involved is this was a partnership work with Light of Hope Philippines and also Fab Lab UP Cebu here in Cebu. And this is to supplement the limited access of power in island communities, just because most island communities were never even connected to the power grid even before Typhoon Odette. So we looked at this as the identified problem. So there was a lot of assessment, as also mentioned by Jenica. This is how we work in the humanitarian sector to critically identify how to serve them with our model of localization. So, and the reason for that too is because after Typhoon Odette, there's no power, no communication. They couldn't call anyone to do anything and to get anything in these islands. So we did some product development together with the two partners that I've mentioned, and we even did that here at my apartment just because of the limited amount of resources that we have in terms of power and everything. So and with the model of localization, there was a challenge of identifying which materials that we can only use that are already available here locally. And with that, we were able to make this portable solar charging kit that can charge 50 devices in a day, 16 devices at a time, and it also saves 30 pesos per person per day to have their phones charged. Because originally, if these communal charging stations or kits were not around, they would have to have their phones charged in a neighborhood that has either um, a genset or a solar system where they have to pay 30 pesos to charge their phone twice in a day. That's just an average. And that's like 900 pesos in a month, which is I think half of the usual, or at least like the minimal average of an electric bill if you're actually connected to a grid. So that's actually much more expensive. So that was actually an unintended benefit that we realized at the end of the project. So yeah, and it was funded by the Chicago Community Trust, and that was the current project that we're doing. Again, to add also, like you mentioned about Shenzhen, and yes, Shenzhen was it was an absolutely crazy. It blew my mind. Just the amount of materials, both electronic and materials that you can do to make certain items and products that are available within this whole city. You could just get or have an idea of a certain product, and they could just make an exact sample with the exact material that you wanted for that product within a certain amount of time. So yeah, it was a great time going there. Right. Hey, Sir Charles. Yes. Uh, how
Oh wait, sorry. Let me clarify that. Charles, how did you hear about the remote communities that needed help?
Right. For this response, we targeted the island communities of Bohol and Cebu. Um, just because, as mentioned, targeting the power problems, that was something that all of us have experienced right after the typhoon. We looked at who were going to be the last communities that will get their power back. Because in the main island, as much as it takes like a month or two for you for households to have the power back, these island communities, some of them will actually never going to have it anyway. So that's where we targeted that, and Bohol had more island communities, so we dug deeper into getting the data of the provincial government of Bohol. We attended a lot of the cluster meetings and got the data that we need. There are 81 island communities in Bohol, and all of them were highly affected. I can't speak much of the volume of aid that went Bohol in comparison to other provinces, but all I can say is that the work that has been done there were the collective effort of the locally organized response group, the NGOs, and the local government.
Thanks for that, Charles. So we'll take another break and then we'll return to emergency architects to we'll close the loop and um, we'll have some more forward-looking questions to address the the thought that we've been thinking if we can adapt to our new climate reality and if we're ever going to be ready for the next typhoon or how far we can reduce the risk in climate disasters like Odette. So we'll take 2 minutes for a break, and we'll be back and discuss the future. Thank you, and stay tuned.
Welcome to the Twitter space of Makati House. Our mission is to help Filipinos help other Filipinos. On December 16th in 2021, Typhoon Rai, locally named Odette in the Philippines, made its first landfall. Categorized as a super typhoon, the climate disaster is the deadliest in 2021, taking hundreds of lives, destroying property costing an estimated $794 billion. Filipinos banded together to recover and rebuild homes and the lives of those affected. But what can we do to adapt to our new climate reality? We've invited emergency architects, Waves for Water Philippines, and Field Ready to share their projects and initiatives. A reminder, our space is recorded and being streamed live to YouTube, Facebook, and Clubhouse. Once again, welcome to Makati House.
Okay, welcome back. And now we're joined by emergency architects. We'll ask more about this wonderful material that we have, um, coconut, which also has we've had a song in honor of this this material. I think a lot of Filipinos are familiar with the coconut song, um, or the coconut nut.
The
So,
giant.
yeah. So um, uh, from what I understand, Sergio has been doing a lot of research on the coconut as a construction material, or a primary construction material. And he also has extensive experience, more than 35 years of experience working with coconut. So, what is the science behind using coconut? Or what can you tell us more on your existing research on the material?
Mainly, it's the for coconut lumber. It's the compressive strength. No, it's been tested the testing of the property of coconut timber for compression. Mataas siya, very comparable to the, like I said, the traditional species that we had before. That, mind you, we no longer have now. Wala na tayong tangile, wala na tayong apitong. But we do have coconut lumber that can function very much the same manner for compression, just as much as the traditional timber. So we know that alone, that figure alone, that property alone of the timber allows us to be able to utilize the material and components such as, well, posts. We can use it in wall studs. We could even use it for roof framing. That alone will already comprise a large bulk of framing work for a residential unit, no? Whether it's low cost or mid cost or economic housing. So you can bank on this material. I mentioned before, way back to 1986, we did a convent in Zamboanga City, in Mercedes, Zamboanga City. Out of all of the framing work, we made use of coconut timber, and not only for framing, we even made use of exterior planks for the sidings for exterior. We used selected coconut timber. There's a there's a government official there, a prominent who's with the CocoFed, no? So nag-import siya ng machine, and we were able to use a mill, a sawmill for the production of coconut components, no? All everything that you could think of, wood planks, 2x6s, 2x4s, you know, the usual sizes and shapes that you would use for a house. And we were able to do about 3 houses, and farmhouses for this patron. In 1987, I was able to do, like I said, the municipal building, because they don't have money and they have to construct it in 1987. They need a municipal building. So I helped them construct, making use of coconut lumber. We were able to complete a municipal building made out of more than 50% coconut timber framing, and it's still standing until now. I was able to do also a resort, the hotel, the 3-story hotel, making use of coconut timber framing for the interiors, for the partitions. Until now, there are some applications, no, that I make use of coconut timber, especially the one that we will be doing in Zamboanga. We have already prepared the bill of materials, and we could be able to start that next month. So wall framing, even roof frame, you can make use of coconut timber.
Right. Yes, that's a good point, and I understand where that helps the Philippines, or maybe the world, right? In terms of sustainability, when we do have a shortage of other sources of timber, um, we do have a lot of coconut inventory. Instead of cutting down our forests, we can just farm the coconut sustainably, and that would I mean that and we can protect our forests, and increase the land area of our forests that way. We can revisit this topic and what and on how the architectural perspective um, can help with sustainability, especially in construction, or like right now, not in just residential or interior design. Um, for example, the government right now is focused on a build program, which has some questionable concerns or has important concerns on the climate, um, like cement, on how we can have um, sustainably or low or zero to low impact climate impact when manufacturing cement. Um, and one thing for Miss Choi, maybe you mentioned the Coconut Palace. Uh, g- can you expound on that example of the use of coconut for the
Yeah,
Coconut Palace?
it's interesting that you asked that because while Joe was talking about his actual experiences researching and making use of coconut as in many of his projects, the reason why we found the Coconut Palace so interesting is because our iconic our architectural icon, the late Bobby Manyoza, actually showed to us that it's not just a matter of making use of coconut as because people have no money, but we were able to see how we can also make use of inspired by coconut to create opulent palace such as what we have. It's actually called the tahanang Pilipino, but of course it's more known to us as the Coconut Palace, and he was able to put together the divergent concerns about building and weaving it into a whole, because it's a whole complex, and it's amazing how uh, in the hands of an able designer architect, you would see how the whole tree has been his inspiration for the very many features of this house. But I think what's important for us to know also is that it was turned into a research and development laboratory, because we have seen the capability of how of coconut, and how, as I said, architecture can actually serve. But then now after some time, we will see that when we make use of architecture in our lives as a way of living our lives, it's not just about form, but also the content. And now eventually that we are faced with a problem of global climate change, and as you said, how the earth has to be also taken care of. Architects are actually, we have taken it upon ourselves to take care of the environment. And if we have so much of coconut trees, we can make use of it as a way for us not to build sustainably, as you have been mentioning. So for us, we have learned so much making use of coconut, and it's been called also the tree of life in the tropics. No, so it's there's so much. But I think we just need to document it more and really go for testing so that we would discover more. Because I think there has to be a certain age, no, Joe?
Yes.
Tree cannot like. How do you know if it's strong enough to withstand a certain strength of winds like this? So these are things that we need to write down, and so that we can make use of coconut, not just for aesthetics, no, but for structural use, no, for our structures like this. So I think it's really very interesting. So it's not just the UAP, no, but even individual architects in their practices have been making use of yeah, I mean their way of building. And I think we have to see how this has to benefit all of us. I mean, sharing this knowledge, and we'd like that architecture is really a service, no, not just for the rich, no, or that because it's difficult to be an architect. In fact, I was talking with another architect the other day, and we were saying, unless you're passionate and you really really want to do this, it's a very difficult job to do because it's combining art and science. You have to it has to be something like you have to feel something. It has to speak to you about. And then now that we are faced with disasters, it has to protect you. Architecture has that responsibility. So there, that's what I think.
Yes.
You know, Choi,
Mhm.
Yeah.
yeah, the talking about the age of the mature age of the coconut tree for harvesting,
Yeah.
it's this is linked with the sustainability of the material. You know, ang lifespan niya is 65 years. 60 in a good 65 years, he produces a lot of benefits, a lot of products, no, for the farmer. And then at the end of the lifespan, 65, it doesn't produce anything anymore. So puputulin na talaga siya ng farmer para mabenta siya, no? It costs something like 1,000 peso per tree for the farmer, no? And the thing is, if it can be usable at the end of its lifespan, so all you need is medyo mahaba-haba lang, no? 65-year program of sustainability. Like if you plant every year, on the next year, if you plant if you plant trees every year for 65 years, on the next phase you'll be harvesting, di ba? And so on and so forth. Every year thereafter you'll be harvesting coconut tree, full grown, matured, no more wala nang non-producing coconut trees anymore that you could properly make use of as coco timber, which is ripe and mature, na talagang yun ang kinakailangan mong age niya dahil matibay siya.
I think also
Yeah.
the reason that they called it the tree of life in the tropics is because every part of the coconut tree you can make use of it. Like the inside, there's the heart, and then there's the it's a soft central pith of the upper trunk, and it's edible. And then many other parts of the tree can be turned into utensils and then cloth. I mean, it's talaga a tree that offers itself. So if it's going to be, and then there has a lot to be said about sustainability, that we should allow death to happen. However, if one tree dies, we have to make sure that we replant and make sure that that tree grows. And so maybe it makes us understand more what sustainability means, that it's not that things are like forever, pero that we have this responsibility to keep life growing, no? Pushing, like, yun nga, nag-overlap yan. So, yeah, 65 years is a long time, and it could be the life of a human being also, no? Not to say that, diba, it's not to say na at 65, medyo death should be around the corner, pero you know how it is, no? I understand what you're saying, so there.
Yeah, I think they call it cradle to cradle.
Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah. Thank you for clarifying that. Well, last two questions. So in the context of debt and rebuilding, why do we need architects? So do we need maybe engineers might ask you, why are you here?
Yes,
Yeah.
I know, but a lot of architecture schools sprung forth from engineering schools. So it's actually, pero in time, we have seen that our engineers can build anything. Like right now, one thing that you might ask us also, if there are other projects that the UAP has. Just today, or maybe yesterday, I was able to talk to some friends from the Couples for Christ. They have a project in the Negros Oriental area, and they're actually making use of their churches or chapels to be used as community centers for the community for the people in the community in case of a disaster, so they can make use of that as a temporary housing until their houses are fixed. And these are engineers. And they came to us, architects. And it's amazing because we know that there's this standing, misunderstanding between the two professions. And in fact, between us, we said we will not go into that. We're here to help our people. And they said, we can build anything, but we love that you architects, you research, and that you will help us understand also how it will respond better to human relationships, because architects are really space makers and space designers. And so if there is really no structure that would be built better if it were not a collaboration among these space makers, which are the architects and the engineers. And so um, architects are there, and we try to do our jobs the best way we can. And we'd like to help in building structures that will really be a space for man to thrive in, considering that we are up against so much, even in urban areas, space is threatened because there's no more space. Now you go to the rural areas, sometimes you don't have enough materials for what you want to build, but then we know that there are resources. And so by the studies that we make, by the knowledge that we have regarding putting together science and art, we would like very much to help society build back better, build sustainably, and with resilience. And so this is what we would like to do. And on architects, because we studied for this, we have been trained for this. This is something that we'd like to offer society. But then again, as I told you earlier, disaster risk reduction management, it's such a new concept for some reason. And this has not been fully taught in school. So we have our continuous professional development. And the United Architects of the Philippines has a special commission for this that takes charge of developing us further. The emergency architects have capacity building seminars also, and we have research that we prepare, turn into seminars that we can offer our members and even non-architects. It's just that we have the license that would uh, hold us responsible for safety of and caring for life and property in society. And so that responsibility is something that we take to heart, and we'd like to offer our presence in society in doing this job, no? So there.
Thank you for that, Miss Choi, and you preempted my next question.
Oh,
Yeah.
oh,
So
good.
yeah.
Yes,
So
yes.
yeah. So let's turn to Waves for Water now. So Jenica, Waves for Water Philippines has a lot of partners. It was a very long list, and actually there was a lot a lot of partners that I couldn't recognize some of the logos anymore. So how did you reach out to them, or how did they find you?
I explain water. I would say does humanitarian work quite differently. I would say the mantra or the philosophy of the organization is do what you love and help along the way, and that resonates with a lot of people because we really just want to provide a platform for people to be able to plug in purpose into things they're really passionate about. So we try to go around or against the typical or more bureaucratic humanitarian organizations, those that have high overheads, those that really just, I would say, are more, yes, I would say bureaucratic to be quite diplomatic about things. So I think because they see that we're quick, we're nimble, and we are able to respond to certain needs in the short amount of time in terms of the turnaround, there's been a lot of individual support, a lot of influencers that have worked with us and promoted the cause, and companies actually, yes, some of them have reached out to us quite organically. Others is really just from our own network. So it's just really word of mouth, and I would say social media played a huge role in funding. We also have a global office, so that helped rally huge support from the international community as well. And what really, I guess, played a role in the significant amount that we fundraised. So to date, we've fundraised at least 30 million pesos already, and that that's really from a lot of our. Just really, a lot of it has really been crowdsourced from social media. So we have a fundraising platform on our own website, so it's our own, and people have just really donated towards that. So the partners come two ways. So either, yes, from word of mouth, us sometimes we cold call or just message and email, and then really what's proven to be really fruitful and fairly easy to just negotiate with and informally, just go through an informal donation process, not a lot of paperwork. It's through friends and friends of friends. So it's really this, I guess, unprecedented level of Filipinos helping Filipinos we've seen for Odette. And in terms of our fundraising, a huge bulk of that really comes from CSR, or corporate social responsibility activities of a lot of private sector companies in the country.
Yes. So have you seen this level of CSR activity previously? And I know one of your largest partners is Cebu Pacific. So how important as a partner was Cebu Pacific? Sorry.
In
Yeah.
terms of the level of CSR engagement, we really saw that in the depth. But prior to that, we've really been working with a lot of companies already. So from small, your SMEs to international um, retail shops like H&M or Canva. We work with anybody who really just wants to further the advocacy and make access to clean water available to everyone. For Cebu Pacific, this was more of a warm connection. I had a friend who was senior management that connected me to their CSR. So I went to school with her, and it started from there. So really, I think in the Philippines, relationships play a huge role in how quickly things can get mobilized and how people can really just vouch for you as an or effort for you as an individual and the organization that you carry, and then just a lot of informal conversation after. Cebu Pacific really proved to be instrumental even before Odette, because they're our official airline partner and they've been flying our cargo, so it's really life-saving cargo and technology for free. And as a huge carrier in the country with significant reach in a lot of provinces, it was fairly easy for us to work and adjust to pandemic restrictions, because we could just cargo out technology, the filters, and then have our couriers, our clean water couriers, pick them up from the airport. We conduct the training online if that's needed, and then they cascade the technology to the community. So it was a very quick response on that end, and I think that really created significant impact. Really a huge collaborative effort from, just a multi-sectoral group, from private sector, from individuals, from grassroots organizations, to even the academe whose students. So we have good relationships with some universities that also provide us with interns, and just having more manpower in that sense help augment us being crippled also by Omicron.
That's amazing. Free logistics. That's I wish. Hopefully that there are more private businesses who are willing to, or more organizations in the private sector that can pitch in. I think for me it's unheard of. And also I know you mentioned you have a very small team and you took on a humongous effort. Um, Can you talk more about how you managed your mental health? I did see one of your posts. You mentioned, I think you mentioned that people were giving away your phone number, and for instance, I think you got a lot of complaints because they thought Waves for Water Philippines was a business. Can you tell us more about your mental health and maybe that story on why you wrote that post?
Yeah, so it was really tough because, Waves for Water tries to keep overhead at the minimum. It's really how we've also survived the pandemic. And early on, actually, 2 years ago, just at the height of everything shutting down, we really didn't know how we would survive because travel and really just interaction with communities was so integral to the work. And so we really couldn't see a way for us to continue doing the work without, being without having to go out there. Another issue was that because our funding significantly came from corporate social responsibility initiatives, this was also the first to get cut, when a lot of private sector companies were tightening their belt. So it was really tough for us to continue. But we managed to push on because we had a small team. So we have a small overhead. Everyone's paid living wages, but we're just five in the team. And so this means that although we're five, I think we're 15 people are at least doing 2 to 3 roles in varying capacity. So it's not always full on in that sense. There's just really peak season, I would say disaster season, that everybody is really quite stretched to their limits. And what I mentioned a while ago, the complication there was Omicron. We had to report physically to the office and to our storage to pack the filters and field requests and, figure out logistics like it wasn't always a flight that was available. So could, this truck take this? Could this Navy ship? Could this, Philippine Air Force plane take, whatever filters we had set for deployment. So it was a lot of coordination, and it was tough on my end because a lot of it was really centralized. And I just became point person for everything, which really took a toll because our manpower was halved. Personally, I was going through a lot. Also, like my family got COVID as well, except me. So there's just a lot going on at an individual level, and I think this is really something that I felt the need to be honest and transparent about. That there were just some things that couldn't be done because there was a pandemic, because there was Omicron, and really to manage people's expectations because we were fielding 100 requests, at the height of it in a day, and it was just we didn't have process. Everything for us was manual in that sense. There was no algorithm for us to initially be able to just automatically field stuff. So it was tough in that end, and I was working up to 20 hours a day. It wasn't sustainable for me, and I really had to take a step back and put out that just to be honest to people about the reality of running a humanitarian organization that has a small team and has a tight overhead, but we were just trying to really manage everybody's expectations. And for me, I shared with you, during the pre podcast call about how I have a bipolar. I have bipolar, so I'm manic depressive. But I think it was a blessing during that time that I was, because I knew I could function on so little sleep and still be able to really just keep on going at it. But I guess just having a higher level of self-awareness, knowing what my limits are, and knowing and acknowledging that I was operating beyond, a happy middle, which was sustainable for me, helped me continue on, even if I was working at a sustainable level, if that makes sense. Parang because I was aware that I was going beyond my capacity, I was still able to manage because I was articulating it. And really just being able to keep myself grounded with, I'm Christian, so faith played a huge role, and just coming to terms with my own limitations. That I wasn't supposed to do everything, that I couldn't help everybody. It was still a tough pill for me to swallow because of just, I guess, the moral dilemma and the gravity of the messages we were getting and I was fielding, because to assert, for a time I felt like I was an emergency response dispatcher, and I had to take things very objectively, even if the messages were really just emotional. People were literally begging us to send them the technology because their family, their friends were dying, were getting dehydrated, were having severe cases of diarrhea, and it was just tough for me to manage that in that sense when it was just just put on my shoulders in that sense. But coming to terms with just our limitations and my individual limitations, and being at peace that we did the best that we could with the resources that we had at the moment, I think has helped me process what's happened. But during that time, at the height of it, I really had to be objective. I couldn't be emotional. I couldn't really even show as much empathy as I wanted to, because there's just so many decisions that needed to be made with a sense of urgency. So overall, I think even having conversations like this helps me process, and it's also in a way therapy, because I get to articulate what happened and really also be able to share the realities behind the scenes of running a grassroots nonprofit.
Right. Thank you for addressing that and sharing. I guess we can call it tips on how to run a small humanitarian organization. I don't think I might be able to handle it, but yeah, let's see. I can give it a shot. Yeah.
I'm sure.
Yeah. We previously had we previously discussed mental health, and it is very important and not talked about enough. And we really appreciate you sharing that. Um, and and now that you've closed your request form, I saw you have an upcoming event, Race for Water 2022. Can you quickly talk about that? Are you?
Yeah, so
Yeah.
as I mentioned, we want to be a platform for people to just be able to participate in helping further the advocacy and really being able to provide access to clean water, making that a reality for everybody, for all Filipinos. So March 22 is World Water Day, and we'd like to invite everybody, people on this call, listening online and on the stream, to check out Race for Water, so that at Race number 4 Water on Instagram and on Facebook. It's a virtual run and ride challenge or experience where you pledge a certain mileage or a certain distance. So either you walk, you run, you bike. You can also go all out if you want to do moto or kayak and a paddleboard. And there's other activities that collect mileage, and really pledging a certain distance for a full month from March 22 to April 22nd. Whatever you finish will convert into liters of clean water. And we'll do that because there's registration fee, etc. So it's really just a way for us to be able to create awareness that there's still a lot. Half of the Philippine population still don't have access to improved water resources, and the average that people walk to get water that's not even treated is 6 kilometers. So in solidarity of that, and to provide a tangible way for people to be able to help, there's Race for Water. You guys can check it out and work out, get fit for a cause.
Yes, thank you. And those are valuable insights and numbers that you just uh, gave to us. It's going to be a wake-up call. And I hope you can, or well, not you, maybe me, for myself, I could set a new personal record. So, what are your other future projects? You mentioned you're planning to do a rainwater catchment system. Are you looking for collaboration? We have in this group, in this space, we have architects, we have a maker. Maybe we can uh, all work together. We can help with promoting it, and then you guys can work on something together. It sounds like I saw you had some plans or drawings of the I think some covered toilets, sheltered toilets, and rainwater catchment system.
Yeah, definitely. Would love to collaborate, and we're happy to be a part of this conversation because um, we'd love to get the expertise of the architect, and Charles and I actually have spoken already on Messenger to get on a call. So there's a lot of opportunities to collaborate. In terms of our future projects, so as I mentioned, the backbone of what we do are the filtration systems, and it's really just addressing an immediate need. But outside, or in the more holistic approach to WASH, what we want to do is also continue building rainwater catchment systems so people make the most out of monsoon season and help have bigger storage capacity for fresh water. Look into building level 2 water supply systems. This is a bit trickier sometimes because lang of land use, so the right to use and right of way for piping systems, but it's something that we've also pursued in another project. Aside from that, we are also rehabilitating and in Palawan. And so there's different ways of really maximizing that design in terms of sanitation. Just making sure that it's culturally sensitive as well, because there's a lot of innovation, but there's also a lot of education that needs to be done because it's behavior change that needs to be highlighted. There's a lot of infra that you can do, but if people don't understand the link of everything, why they need to wash their hands, why they need to defecate in proper toilets, then we won't be able to maximize the impact of these infra. So that's why the software, the behavior change, and education needs to come together. So we're doing that. Sanitation initiatives, complementing it with hygiene education and also provision of hygiene kits. So we are employing a holistic approach to WASH. It will take more time, but we have some pilot communities that we're in conversation with. And yeah, we're happy to explore and help complement some of the shelters that the UAP folks are doing with rainwater catchment systems or even filtration devices to make the water potable.
Janica, we hear you. Yeah, so we're happy, right, Joe? We'll tell the group, and then we'll see how we can, it's not by chance that we meet here in Makati House. I mean, in this event.
Yeah, definitely. So we'll all be in touch, I'm sure. Thanks, JP, for getting us all together.
I agree on that.
Yes, I'm looking forward to that, and I really want to. I really want that to materialize, and I don't know what I can contribute. But let's talk again and see what we can do. Um, let's give Charles a chance sometime. So Charles, we want to know what technology will be useful in adapting to our new climate reality. Is there a low-tech, simple solution?
Wow, it's a huge question, JP. But well, I did have a thought of this question, and recently I've seen these products where they are now developing glass windows as solar panels. Of course, I'm not sure yet on that progress, but that is a huge no. That is huge. Knowing how it can potentially be scaled for many buildings and even households and even cars or even public transportation. But of course, it won't be cheap when it comes out. So, but hopefully, when it comes around, or it comes to a point that it's accessible for everyone, that would be good. But really, mass transportation is also something that every time I see another country that has that, I envy them just because I myself really takes the local transportation just to save some of those carbon footprint and everything. But to answer the low-tech simple question, the sachet economy is a huge contributor to the waste that we produce. And if ever, or maybe there has already been somebody that's doing this, hopefully, if ever there's a way to bring the refill concept down to the sari-sari store level and be the cheaper alternative than the sachet, and I think that would hopefully disrupt the day-to-day consumption or the ways of consumption of each individual in a community around the sari store. Also, eliminating sachets that they get to throw. I think that's sort of one of the low-tech, simple solution that I would hope that will happen at some point.
Yes, I agree. And also we did have another guest previously with Pia. That's actually at our first event that we had. It's called the Soli Soli store, which is a reverse of the Sari Sari store. Yeah, so um, and thank you for. I agree with the sachet economy and how it needs. I think there's a bigger picture that we need to see there on how we can re-engineer that economy and new materials for those sachets. Um, who are the benefactors of Field Ready?
Pwede na muna tumulong ako mag-material.
And I know you mentioned like I think AusAid or USAID. Are you looking for sponsors? How can people pitch in?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, as a humanitarian organization, as what Janica said, we're constantly looking for ways for partnerships and funding opportunities that we could apply or work with just to pursue some of our models of the model of humanitarian response and community development work that we would want to do. Um, But thinking about the beneficiary as well, every field ready program in response has different beneficiaries. Generally, is the affected population and the challenged communities. But it also doesn't. Our work doesn't also just limit to that. We also have programs in some other countries that targets youth and the creatives in the country that are operating the make phase of a fab lab, wherein this country starts by building a fab lab in a makerspace to do capacity development and promote innovation in their communities, 21st century skills, and whatnot. But over here, since we already have that, we don't necessarily have to build. And I've mentioned already the model that involves the fab lab a while ago. Yes, and you mentioned about the projects that you wanted to know that I like. Field Ready has been having a lot of different products and projects and that we've developed that has catered to a specific community that we're assisting. So, there's a lot of really great ones, like from flatback hand washing stations that was developed in Fiji, now also manufactured in East Africa. There's the stackable latrines in Fiji to have these latrines be deployed in island communities with lesser transport system, with a smaller transport system. There's also using plastic waste to insulate refugee camp shelters in Syria. We have a hydroponics project in Nepal. We also have a program that transforms evacuation centers for people with movement disability in the Pacific, and even 3D printing broken spare parts that are needed to fix equipment in the Middle East. But all of these are like very high tech and all that. But I think there's just one of the products that we've worked with, and I know this is arguably the surprise soap always amazed me just because it's so simple yet it's so effective. So what is this surprise soap? The surprise soap is basically a soap that has a toy inside, and the reason for that is this is to encourage kids to wash their hands. So obviously, the more you wash your hands, the more chances you get that toy inside. I like it because it's so simple, but it's so effective. And it may not be the technical and techy answer that you think. This is something that I like, the simple things that are so effective. Yeah, and hopefully some point we could do those products here, maybe distribute it in a kindergarten when classes starts to open, just to keep the hand washing traditions going, even post-COVID. So yeah, that's what I think. That's a good product.
Yes, thanks, Charles. Yeah, I think it's important that, especially after COVID, right, the value of hand washing. And I think Jenica can echo this sentiment. Um, and finally, are you looking for volunteers? What type of skills are you looking for, and where is your next target location?
We're always looking for volunteers. We always welcome volunteers, not even just for the Philippines, but also in some parts of where we work in the world. But specifically for the Philippines right now, not yet. But we will definitely announce that as soon as we get one or we need one. Um, but globally, we have many volunteers that has been very great at their work, and we are very thankful for them. Mostly people with engineering background. If anybody's listening that has that and are interested in humanitarian work, we really welcome you when we need some volunteers on the ground soon. But it's not limited to it at the same time. It really varies on the needed skill set for the specific project or response work. So yeah, we definitely welcome volunteers when we need them.
Awesome. Um, yeah, and maybe are you open to architects as well? Because I think UAP has a long list of graduating architects or architects that are about to be licensed.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. Anything, anybody that has a lot of the engineering and design background, yeah, which includes architecture, um, architects as well, is very much welcome.
Excellent. I like how we are all able to connect here. So finally, before we end, and I know we're over time again and we started late. I apologize again for that. Um, for Miss Choi and Sir Joe, where can people learn more about UAP?
We have a website, but you could look us up also on Facebook. Uh, yeah, the United Architects of the Philippines and the United Architects of the Philippines Emergency Architects have separate Facebook pages. Yeah, and then Wikipedia, and then all the links are there. Yeah, we're
Right.
easy to find. And then Joy and I were also in Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. Yes.
Okay, great. And we have a couple of new listeners, and they can reach out to you directly. How
Yes.
about you, Jenica? Waves for Water Philippines.
Yeah, please reach out and feel free to connect with us on Instagram. So that's at Waves for Water Philippines, or email Philippines at wavesforwater.org. We're also on Facebook. You can message us there, and then I am also on Instagram. So that's where I'm most active. So yeah, feel free to reach out. We don't necessarily we work with community-based volunteers. So if you're in a place or you identify a need and are able to give us more information, send photos, please connect with us because we'd be happy to look into your waterless community and line that up in our list of prospects so we can match it with a donor.
Thanks, Jenica. Finally, Charles.
Yes, if you want to know more about Field Ready, our website is fieldready.org. Our social handle at many social platforms is at Field Ready without the vowels, so that will be at FLDRDY. We're on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, LinkedIn, and even TikTok. Everyone's on TikTok now, even the NGO. Also, if you want to email us at admin.philippines@fieldready.org. Thank you.
Thanks, Charles. So last thing, before we wrap up, what are your uh, parting words to our listeners, or to our other speakers? Let's get one from everyone. Miss Choi.
Yeah, thank you. First and foremost, I am very grateful for this opportunity that you have given us because I've always loved discourses such as this where we can really do something together. I have told you earlier that I think this is a culture that we need to build together. It's we cannot go anywhere. The 21st century is really about collaboration, and our world, which is volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous, gives us this opportunity to work together so that we can find solutions to the many problems that we have. And rather than think of the pandemic and all the disasters that we go through as yeah, of course it's adversity, it's difficult, but it's also an opportunity for us to see the best of the best versions of ourselves. And in fact, I like that towards the end, you have raised the possibility of us working together. So I'd like to invite everyone to get involved, because this doesn't happen with us watching how the world is going to just destroy itself. Of course, with a lot of our help also, as in this Anthropocene age, I think we need to get more involved, dialogue more, and discover things that we can find new paths to do things together. So thank you for this opportunity.
I would like to say, what would be next for coconut lumber? While the Coconut Palace was able to effectively showcase the architectural applications for cocoa timber, it will be good to look forward to more applications, testing on the structural use of coconut lumber, and be able to look forward to a time wherein we could integrate both structural and architectural use of this very resilient material. Uh, we were able to deploy uh, temporary shelters in LGU such as in Nabotas, Malabon, and Caloocan before. And we work with LGUs, government agencies, and it was a very efficient, productive, and very rewarding experience. Those are the, like Director Choi said, we can really accomplish a lot with collaboration. So, we're running out of time, I think. We're getting late with, the matter of resilience, no, in our communities, and we should be able to help our communities, especially our vulnerable communities, soon rather than later. Thank you.
Thank you, Sir Joe and Miss Choi. I really agree to your sentiments. Um, Jenica.
Just final thought. I guess going beyond preparing for super typhoons is really mitigating and building resilience to climate change that will be crucial. And this means taking a systems thinking approach. So something more holistic that takes into account long term perspectives and really looks at the relationships of different parts. So really trying to address, not just address, I guess, or mitigate climate change, but also understanding the link of this to social and climate justice, because it's often been touted, and climate change, the fight against climate change has really been framed as a matter for individual action. That if people just drove and flew less, if you just consumed less, or if you ate more sustainably sourced food, or if you go vegan or vegetarian, parang, we could significantly reduce greenhouse gas emissions. But that's really not, there's some truth to that, but it's not the whole truth, because policy also needs to complement and making those better choices easier. It's hard to demand from people to stop using sachets, for example, when that's the only thing they can afford. It's hard to be sustainable in a country where minimum wage doesn't even allow for people to live comfortable lives. So anything that allows people to be more sustainable actually costs more. in a lot of instances. So systems need to be put in place to support that behavior change. And this is why a strong commitment to reduce emissions systematically in the form of policy also needs to happen. So it's really good to have conversations like this that directly go into grassroots, but at the policy level, things need to be also addressed and demanded for. So this is really, I guess, what I'd like to end with, that there's a lot of individual action that's really good, and hopefully will also put pressure and highlight the gap that governments and policymakers need to address.
And quite inspiring to myself at the same time. And I think the best part here is that I think on the side for the listeners, I think while we're all speaking here, on the side we've been already messaging how we together in terms of pursuing our model of response and humanitarian work together, and hopefully that would be something that we end up doing. Some of the things that we are discussing about will come into fruition, and which is something that we could say that really also came out as a fruit of this Twitter space conversation that we had today. So thank you, Makati, for that.
Yes, thanks, Charles. Sorry, my app crashed again. Um, it's only our second space, and we're still trying to work out the kinks. But thank you for your patience and sharing your knowledge and experience, and your kind words to inspire everyone. And we do have some announcements, and in honor of our guests, we we have donated to Planet Cora in cooperation with Project Batang VIP. So the project is raising funds to build fishing boats in Batangas. Um, uh, there was an island there where a typhoon last year destroyed fishing boats. So they are rebuilding 12 fishing boats for a fishing village. And Makati House has raised funds for to build one boat, and we will have your names or your organization's names inscribed on the boat. And I think I've also mentioned to the Batang VIP project that I want a flag raised with our logos in it. So we'll get some documentation from that when it becomes available. I would love to see your names and the logos of your organizations waving in the sea, and because the these are local people who are very vulnerable, and they need all the help we can get, and um, they the recipients appreciate the work that you're doing for them too. This is for everyone, right? So and that includes them and the children in the Batang VIP project, and that's in Verde Island in Batangas. So thanks everyone for tuning in tonight. I would I think there are some questions from the audience. For dear speakers, would you be able to take a couple more questions?
Yes.
All right. Okay. So we have oh, disappeared. Okay. We'll take it some. We'll give a few more minutes for. I think somebody wanted to ask a question but disappeared. Okay. All right. We have Max. Oh, okay. I know Max. He is also a big proponent for Wash. Max, if you can, I've sent the invite to you. If you could share with us what you've been working on, or if you have any questions for our speakers.
Hello. It was Karen. You asked me, or you were talking to another person?
Yes, yes. Do you have something to share with us or a question to
Yes.
ask our speakers?
Yeah. I did a small short talk yesterday in South by Southwest about the climate change effects and how we can make change adaptation for the crops in coffee and wine and vineyard, because they've been destroyed by high temperatures in summer and cold temperatures in winter. What do you think is gonna happen? Because I have a list of about 10 endangered species, specifically crops and things that we are eating, and they're being affected by climate change. Do you think funds and angel investors and even the food industry is really aware what is going on? Because I've seen a lot of interest, and they're worried about a lot of things around the crops, like agtech, about predicting how the weather is going to behave, but they are not worrying about DNA, genetics, and profiling crops to find original DNA, like we're doing in Cabernet Sauvignon and coffee, because they've been modifying the genetics of several crops. Do you think there is awareness about that in the ecosystem? I'm really concerned, really, about it. Thank you.
Yes, were you asking about plant genetics? I think something Sir Joe mentioned earlier.
I guess if I can jump in, thanks for bringing that up, Mac. That's really, I think, a separate conversation. It is, I would say it's not as mainstream in terms of advocacy and then a concern for many, especially because climate resilient crops um, have been positioned. So GMOs, like genetically modified organisms, have been positioned to be used to build resiliency in agriculture and crop. So I personally don't know as much about coffee and agriculture, but from some of the conversations that I've listened to and articles I've read, there's quite a huge acceptance for GMOs to build resiliency. This is why we have IRI, the International Rice Research Institute in Los Baños in Laguna in the Philippines, to build more climate resilient rice. So I think there's definitely a separate conversation to be had about the underlying effects and other issues surrounding the use of that. At this time, I think it's a separate conversation outside rebuilding for Odette.
If I may chime in, I agree, but this topic is also not very much developed yet here in the Philippines. I was just talking with Charles that in Barcelona, advanced architecture is seen as a way also to work towards food security, and they're very much working towards like they don't like the activities of Monsanto and other GMO companies, and so they are very much aware that part of it's like I agree that it's a separate subject, but if we will talk about resilience, and then if at most in the Philippines, if we just went back to the true essence of agriculture, and then even before we die of anything else, of viruses and other disasters, we would be able to take care of one another. And yeah, food security is one thing that we have to work towards, even if we're talking about uh, resilience in rebuilding or rehabilitation after a disaster. Maybe it's that direction that will eventually lead us there, but yeah, it will have to take on a different conversation altogether, but very much related as well. I agree.
Yes, thank you, Max, for that question. And I do agree, food security is going to be a big issue. I was just reading the latest IPCC report, that's the International Panel on Climate Change. And, you know, uh, I've been following the report since last year. And the, we've although the a lot of countries are making action towards climate or reversing climate change, but um, we're doing not enough. So we're still going at a rate where we'll have, especially here in the Philippines, we'll have a much hotter climate, or record hot temperatures, but also a lot of rain, which will cause more drought. So we can I don't know if it would involve more engineering with crops, but yeah, that it's a I think that's going to be a separate discussion. Max, I think we can take one more question from you, and we can wrap up the room.
Yeah, no, I just wanted to add that how we're managing this is not to try to find the same place the crop. We are looking in this case for vine and coffee. We need to find new places to plant, and that's how we found coffee in a different climate that is adapted to um, colder climate, because Colombia, for example, has been told the world that they are the leading coffee production, and it's true, but coffee doesn't come from a humid weather. It comes from Africa, which is totally different from what Colombia says. So we have to start changing things that corporations have been telling us about crops. And in Chile, for example, we are looking for a place in Chile to plant coffee in the continent. And this has been working for 7 years. We already have the material, and you don't have to worry about trying to find in Philippines sometimes maybe the same place, or try to adapt a GMO or whatever in genetics. You need to start finding new places to plant. I think that's our vision. As I'm an agriculture engineer, I'll be working with the government to do that. So Chile has over 5,000 kilometers from desert up to the coldest and rainiest area, and Chile can be a place to start to restart certain crops from the beginning, which means with no not modifying DNA, but we need to find the original DNA that hasn't been modified, and that's why has been my study with sheeps leaving Europe since 1492. That's kind of I will try to send you the video that I did in South by Southwest, so you can see what we're doing here. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you, Max. And yeah, there's also I read recently that or I learned recently that the coffee making process or the coffee production process has a high water usage. So hopefully that changes soon as well. I also did see another startup working with um, coffee products, like non-coffee products. They were taking nut byproducts and reconstituting it with coffee flavoring and the same uh, components as coffee with using less water. So yeah, sorry, did you want to comment that briefly before we end the space?
Yeah, yeah, we are also trying to find succedanean of coffee which doesn't have caffeine, because the big problem of caffeine is a drug too and affects people. So yeah, definitely there's another type of coffee that made from other seeds that we're also working in Chile to try to put in the market too.
Excellent. Thank you, Max, and thank you for doing that work and sharing it with us. And we hope to see it in our shores someday. And although with funding, I don't know if I can help. I don't have a lot of money, and I don't know a lot of venture capitalists right now. Um, but yeah, thanks everyone. I don't know if there are other people who want to ask the speakers, but you can reach out to them directly. They have mentioned where you can find them, so you can listen to the recording of this space. So thank you again, Miss Choi, Sergio, Janica, and Charles. I really appreciate the time that you've lent to us tonight. I know we're over time and we're late. So thank you so much and have a good evening, good night. And we've recorded a closing message from the team. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank you
you,
for having
JP.
us.
Thanks,
Yes.
everyone.
Bye,
Good night.
everyone. Bye,
Thank you for
speaker.
joining us at Makati
Thank
House.
you,
We're now
everyone.
We stay
Thank
in
you for
touch.
joining us at Makati House. We're now ending the space and we hope to have you again at our next event. The recording will be available shortly. Here are some parting reminders. 5. Look after the land. 4. Plant a tree. 3. Teach kids to love our planet. 2. When the soil disappears, the soul disappears. And 1. Be the change you wish to see in the world.
Bye, JP. Can we go? Can we go?
Bye, JP.